Welcome back. Now, the Minister of Finance, today delivered a budget speech that had received a resounding positive response, with almost no adjustments in tax. In fact, a correction of what is dubbed tax bracket creep. That is to say that people oftentimes on the margin of certain tax brackets pay more than what they ordinarily would have done if those tax brackets were adjusted for inflation. That seems to have been corrected in this year's budget speech in ways that it didn't exist in last year's budget speech. This budget speech heavily focused on expenditure in infrastructure as a catalyst for job creation, and very importantly, making sure that expenditure on debt service costs don't run away from us in ways that are perhaps unmanageable with the very little surplus that we've been able to establish this year due to positive collections from SARS, or at least the primary surplus, that albeit that the deficit remains at around 4.5%. Now, to talk to us about this is the chief economist at Antswisa Capital Partners, Miyelani Mkhabela, as well as Colin, Timmis, who is a regional director at EMEA and in the EMEA region for Xero. Miyelani, I want to begin the conversation with you this evening. You, at a few days ago, provoked the minister to focus on expenditure as a catalyst for job creation, and saying that that will be what really grows the economy. You had projected a 1.6% growth for the economy over the 2026 financial year, and of course 1.8% I think was your projection over the medium term, which is in line with what the National Treasury had projected, also in line with what institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank had put out in their forecast projections for the market. Has the minister hit the sort of notes that you hoped he would have?
Not, because you will find that in economic infrastructure as prioritized, it will not really, or it has not got the expected amount. And when you look on the budget, you still have 1.58 trillion into social services, which is above 60% of the entire budget. So we still presented a welfare budget. And a welfare budget doesn't grow the economy, or the welfare budget, isn't it going to any important primary important things that could swallow the 8 million active economic population that are unemployed. So I think the primary cause for South Africa is to review the economy, continuous growth, or trigger what we call maybe Buffalo miracle growth or miracle growth, which at the current state, we cannot do anything with this budget. It will remain, it will just make us remain in a stagnant economy as it was the past year. So it will not shift anything. There's no change with the last year's budget and this year's budget. Practically, it is just those inflation-based increase on levies, whether it will be a fuel levy and excess levies. That is just like such, but we couldn't really get the funds that could trigger the economy, or get money that could boost the economy from our revenue. And then I think that it is a problem that we'll have, where growth that is anticipated for 2026, it might happen that we don't reach that growth because the amount that we have, it is mainly for social services and revenue for public sector employees.
Yeah, I want to bring into the conversation here, Colin. The minister had noted in today's budget speech an improvement in collections in corporate income tax. Now, one can account that for the commodities boom, meaning that the mining companies in the sector are paying more tax over to the fiscus. But does that headline figure indicate an overall improvement in business confidence in South Africa?
Yeah, look, overall, I think we're seeing debt stabilizing. Inflation is lower to 3.2%. The increase in tax collection, there's still quite a big gap in the tax collection. We don't make it easy for taxpayers to comply, and particularly when it comes to small businesses, I think it can be very challenging for them to comply. I think what was very positive is the increase in the VAT threshold, which you will know moved from a 1 million rand in turnover to 2.3 million rand. And that's not so much about the increase to adjust for inflation over the last few years, but the administrative burden that it removes from very many businesses in South Africa who are just trying to get going. And so we've been really encouraged, I think, to see that VAT threshold increase, the positivity and the signs that it gives to small businesses to really lower their sort of compliance costs and to enable them to make it easy to comply. Now, there's still obviously a large gap, still a lot of tax revenue that needs to be collected. And I think the extent to which SARS and government can take a step forward to also encourage and make it easier for businesses to comply, I think is always positive. And there's fantastic tools and technologies out there that really help a lot of these companies comply. And I think as we go into FY or into the 2026 business year deeper, I think it's going to become really important that we enable these businesses to make profit and, of course, then pay that over to SARS and increase the corporate tax revenue.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, and I'm glad that you mentioned that it's making it easier for small business to become tax compliant, but also to operate. The minister's also made it easier for small business owners to sell their businesses, increasing the threshold on at least the tax burden threshold from about 10 million to 15 million on the sale
Yes.
of small businesses. Talk to us through why that move is such a significant move in what we would call, SME level mergers and
Yes.
acquisition type of activity.
Well, I think it really is a fantastic move, not so much because of the increase in the threshold where capital gains tax is applied, but I think the fact that we're talking about it now and that many small businesses perhaps aren't even aware of that original threshold, aren't even aware of what capital gains tax means or how it's applied to your small business when you sell it. And why is that important? Because the objective of building your business, of getting funding, of finding customers, of growing your company, of taking on staff is that one day you could potentially sell it. And so, to be honest, I think, we're just really encouraged that we get to have these conversations, that we can go back to the sort of accounting community and the small business community that we serve and educate them on the importance of the systems, the processes, the structures, the sort of investment they need to make in their companies, and that their companies, their businesses, are not just about generating a salary or generating a dividend for themselves, perhaps, and of course paying that over to revenue in the various forms of tax, but that the objective is perhaps in 3, 4, 5 years down the line to be able to sell that business, and now you're being given a bit of a gap where the capital gains tax you might pay is a little bit lower. So great to see that extension, but I think what's really positive is the fact that we get to have these conversations about what that objective is that the business owners are trying to achieve, which is one day, perhaps you can sell it.
Yeah, just maybe a last question on tax and tax reform and the instruments, the application there too. And that is that tax brackets have been adjusted and corrected for inflation, meaning that bracket creep is not as perhaps unnoticeable and insidious as it was in the previous fiscal. How do you note that step to be in this budget consideration?
Yeah, it's so important. I'm going to frame it against a small business owner who's running a company and drawing income out of his business by way of dividends or of salaries. There's tax implications on both of those, and this tax bracket increase enables those individuals to maybe be rewarded better and, of course, to reward their staff more. And that's so critically important for the growth of those companies. Being able to draw more funds out, being able to reward your teams and your staff really gives you that opportunity and a bit of breathing space to build a team that can help support your business. So again, there's the tax implications, there's the bracket creep, which makes it more affordable for the companies and more rewarding for the employees. But again, to have those conversations and educate, I think, the business owner on the one hand and the employee on the other about what that means is so important.
Miyelani, perhaps a last question for this discussion, and quite importantly, the minister had referenced certain reforms such as the electricity reform and Eskom and what's been happening there, and very specifically also what's been going on with Transnet and the concession of some of those operations as being positive for the economy as part of the reform agenda. Can we account at least the positive upward revision of economic growth to 1.8% over the medium term to those sort of Operation Vulindlela offshoots?
Like 1.8 for 2026, it might happen that we don't reach that, but we are projecting or we forecast 1.6% for 2026, which practically will be dependent on the continuous reforms that are happening at Eskom. I think me and you, we can agree much. We have been next to energy and Eskom in multiple activities that has been happening the past 2 to 3 years. And I think those reforms at Eskom has been of a great benefit to the country. But when you look on the transmission segment, that is being boosted with additional funding and some credit guarantees in partnership with World Bank. I believe that will continue to activate growth because immediately when we have enough electricity will be affordable, and then mining and manufacturing will be able to produce more while they are spending less. While the cost of electricity is lower, I think that could be the boost that the business needs. While at the same time, specifically, we need to do well on boosting ports, terminals, and logistics connectivity, and make sure that supply chain connectivity, supply chain and networks are at an efficient state so that we can trade much, mainly targeting on the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, because that is an area where we can maximize on as South Africa and make sure that we benefit. Whether some of the economies are not some of the industries are not doing well domestically, but we can get some traction with the benefits from Africa.
Yeah, Miyelani, we're going to have to leave it there. Colin, thank you so much for your time and your insights as well. Really do appreciate it. Of course, the conversation on the budget speech is an unending one in South Africa, given, of course, that our financial situations and the economy is an ever-present thought in the mind space of South Africans. And we will continue some analysis on that throughout the rest of the week as different political parties, different state actors react and respond to that.